Should be in a few seconds.
Wait, are you getting ready to start? Because I need to pee first if you are.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'll just leave this rolling and
Okay.
be right back.
Sounds good.
BRB.
There you are. You can go to my Facebook page now and share it up to yours.
Okay. Let's see. There it is. Then just share it to my page. Start a watch party or share it? Just share it.
Just share the stream. Yep. I'm going to read your bio to start. So
Okay.
we will use that time to settle in.
Cool. Sounds perfect.
Okay, there you are. I think a few people are on. So hello, who's ever watching. More people should pop on as we get going. But okay, hello. This is the 0 Point Podcast. This is episode number 6. My name is Richard Sandilands, and my guest today is Paul Rudy. I'm going to go ahead and read his a little bio, and it is written in the first person, so just pretend that I'm him. In 2012, I moved onto the land of Northeast Kansas. On these 70 acres of woods and prairie, I harmonize with the physical and metaphysical. I honor the energies and ancestors as I balance the feminine and masculine polarity. I play in mind, body, and spirit, and have built land art and a labyrinth where the non-physical becomes palpable. In 2014, I saw the universe of a single breath in a photograph on Halloween. Whether as a composer, performer, nature or subtle energy photographer, writer, speaker, or teacher, my work commutes with essence to honor what is true and unique. The land has taught me about the circle of life, and I have composed about it. I have been called the high priest of sound, and my music described as the universe unfolding one sound at a time. The music that comes through me opens up a horizon that you may choose to navigate on your own terms. The journey is not so much of my design, but of your desire. It will help you come home to yourself. Beautiful. Well, hey, Paul, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Rich?
I'm great. Thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Happy to be here.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, you know my first question, but I'll go ahead and make sure the audience knows too. So you're a sound guy, so I want to know, what do you think the first sound was, and were there people around to hear it? I guess this goes to the Big Bang, but I don't know.
Right.
Do you have an answer?
Well, that's the first thing that came to mind. They call it a big bang for a reason. Like they think it was an explosion. But, even if you go back to the Genesis story, and there are many different creation stories, depending on your faith. But if you go back to that, and the supreme being sort of spoke a word and something came into existence. So if we want to take that as a starting point, then the first sounds were speech, and it happened even before there was anything in existence, according to some creation stories. So sound is the creator.
Yeah.
I mean, my imagination wants to go wild with that,
Yeah, it's such an open-ended question.
It is, yeah. And a long time ago, somebody asked me, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, is there sound? And I thought about that for a while. And I thought, that's really kind of a 19th and 20th century question. To me, the 21st century question is, if a tree falls in the forest, is it music? And I find that a much more interesting question to ponder. And when I run thought experiments like that, like I sort of gather you're a thought experiment guy, like,
Sure.
and we sort of share that in common. When I run those kinds of thought experiments, it's not really so much to find answers, but to find better questions. And
Wow.
and it's always a better question that will lead me deeper, right? So it's never about finding the right answer. It's always about finding something deeper beneath what currently right now is a right answer. So the right answer doesn't exist, but a right answer for this moment always exists.
Yeah. It's just kind of like the questions uncover more information. And if you wouldn't ask the question, it wouldn't be uncovered.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, well, if we could run back to when you first got interested in sound and music, well, I guess two questions. When did you kind of fall in love with sound and music? And do you think that those people are born, like musicians are born musicians?
Right. Yeah. Well, so I'll tell you my experience first, and then hopefully in that process, I'll actually forget about your second question.
That's fine.
Well, yeah, we can talk about that. The first question is, I used to think I fell in love with music when in junior high I got to play the trumpet solo on "In the Mood," Glenn Miller's "In the Mood." And I started improvising on the trumpet, and man, that lit a fire into my butt that burns to this day. But I realized maybe 5 or so years ago that I had a super traumatic experience as a kid. My sister was watching a horror movie on TV, and I was playing behind the couch. I couldn't see it, but I heard these sounds, these screams, these intense sounds.
Yeah.
And so I stopped playing and I started watching that movie, and it scared the hell out of me. I mean, I went to bed terrified that night. I was so clenched up. Every little sound in the room was exaggerated into this gigantic monster. And I used to think that was a distraction in my life. Like that sort of took me down the wrong path, or it sidetracked me from my real path. But my brother in conversation actually helped me realize that it was that experience before I even played music where I understood the power of sound. Like, it was an experience, but at that young age, I think I must have been 6, 7, maybe 8.
Yeah, formational years.
Exactly. And it was that experience that taught me the power of sound. And I think that's why I was drawn to music. That's why I wanted to do it. And sort of one of my next seminal memories in music, I mean, one of the original is singing 4-part hymns in church. My dad was a Mennonite minister, and Mennonites sing beautiful a cappella 4-part hymns in church. So one early memory is when I couldn't really sing the tenor line anymore, and I had to switch to the bass. That was one of my first conscious sort of musical decisions that I had to make. But another one was around that same time that I got totally freaked out by that horror movie. Edgar Winter's Frankenstein came out. I don't know if you know that tune. It's 1971, I think, or 72, right around that time. There is a wicked analog synthesizer solo in that.
Oh, okay.
And my brother made a cassette recording of it just with a microphone off the radio. And I practically wore that tape out. I would listen to that solo and then rewind the tape and then listen to it again. And I think it was the mystery of that sound, right? Synthesizers were not commonplace. And that may have been the first time I actually heard one.
Wow.
And it was this mysterious source that I couldn't quite identify. There was something magical about it. It was classic FM synth. And
I mean, synthesis is magical. I mean, talk about creation. Like, that's creation right there.
Absolutely. Building sounds up from scratch or taking a block of sound and subtracting from it to sculpt something. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great observation.
It's so funny that you like were traumatized by this sound. Do you think, well, so you must have been like just really open to sound when you were young, well, and still now today, but do you feel like that's unique for some people? I guess this is going back to our musicians, born musicians. Are some people just born naturally more sensitive to sound than others?
I'm not sure I would limit that to sound. I think I would say some people are born more open and sensitive to everything. So when I started on my healing journey that eventually led me into sound practice, it was with an amazing woman in Taos, New Mexico, who the first time I met with her, she was looking above my head, like she was literally reading my matrix, like something.
Oh, yeah.
And she was telling me things about myself that there's no possible way she could know. And, oh, wow. Why was I telling that story?
You were in Taos, New Mexico.
Yeah.
She was reading your field.
Yeah. And why was I telling you? What were we talking about just before that? That's why I love memory.
People who are born sensitive and open to things.
Yeah. So she looked me straight in the face that first session and she said, you came into this life completely open with no protection. That was a choice, right? It's not like I'm a victim of that. She was literally telling me, you chose to come into this life completely unprotected so you could experience everything. And the more I think about it, the more I think like, holy shit, man, like, wow, that's intense because, well, we don't even know what everything is. We don't even know what we don't know is as something, and so my life has been about harmonizing, right? Like I can't control what happens to me, and ears are a perfect example of that, right? We don't have earlids, so
oh man, that would be great if we did.
Well, I don't know if we would not be here if we didn't, Rich. Like,
well, like earlids that we could open and close.
Yeah,
like eyelids.
If we could close our ears, we would have all been decimated by saber-toothed tigers thousands of years ago. Like our ears are the reason we have survived. We don't have eyes on the back of our head, so we're completely vulnerable there. And it's sound that alerts us to things that we can't see. And so sound has been an important part of our evolutionary process, right? Like it's the most immediate sense. It's really quick. It helps us locate things that we can't see.
Yeah, it's like spatial awareness. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's the first sense that comes online in the womb. It comes online before anything else. And if you think about it, it's not because of our ears. Like our ears don't work in fluid, or they do, but they're super efficient. But the ears themselves don't work except in the air. So in the womb, we're literally listening through conduction, body, fluid, all kind of muscle, bone, all those kinds of those kinds of transduction. And it's the last, and through research, we know it's the last sense that closes down before we die as well.
Oh,
So
really? Wow.
if you ever encounter a doctor that says, if somebody's in a coma, they can't hear what you're saying, that's not true. Like,
Oh, wow.
we are always listening, and it's why we're still here. So,
Wow.
and so my practice has become, well, so how can I exist in this world where we're constantly accosted by sound? How can we exist and harmonize with everything that's going on around us? And when I say harmony, that doesn't mean everything is pleasant. I mean,
Right.
there's things dying every day out here on the land. There's poison ivy that's choking off the trees and killing the trees that's growing up. Humans aren't the only ones that do that. There's lots of other species that do that. Harmony to me means that when I encounter something, anything, whether positive or negative or traumatic or easy, that I've got my full bandwidth of attention, my full bandwidth of wisdom and understanding to respond to that situation. So it's disharmony to me is when I'm responding with the fight, flight, or freeze syndrome, right? The sort of reptilian response, which, by the way, served us well. If without that response, we wouldn't be here today.
Yeah.
And yet now it's time for us to start moving beyond that,
Right.
and having a wider bandwidth of response, regardless of the situation, right?
Yeah.
So
to take it into sound healing, and I guess I want to because do your individual cells resonate with sound? Like, sound affects us past just the ears. Sound can reverberate through our whole body. So do you know anything about the science of how our cells resonate with sound?
Well, so think about what's the best analogy here? Well, again, when we're in the womb, there is no air. We're literally bathed in fluid, right? And yet we're still hearing. When you listen to yourself on a recording, do you sound different to yourself?
I guess. I mean, I don't know if I usually like the way I sound. I don't know if that's a normal thing. Yeah.
Yeah, most people can't stand it. And the reason is because when you're recorded, you sound different to yourself. You don't sound different to anyone else, but you sound different to yourself, because when you listen to a recording, the sound is not resonating through your bones and muscle and flesh and fascia and all that stuff, right? So when you ask, how does sound interface with cells? I'm like, well, we're 60 to 80% water. The estimates vary. Water is tremendously efficient in terms of transmitting vibration. It doesn't have resonance in the same way that air does.
Oh, wow.
But so if our cells are fluid, then every vibration happening around us, perceived or not perceived, is being received by our body. This thing is a listening instrument. That's what it does.
Yeah.
It listens to vibration. It listens to energy. And we could even say, well, there's electrons in cells, right? So there's a lot of potential for interaction beyond just the physical level, right? That's a metaphysical level where we can literally start tuning ourselves with some intention and with some vibration. And I teach workshops, and I work with clients on this all the time. In fact, I'm teaching a class coming up starting next week with the Global Center for Advanced Studies on introduction to sound practice for well-being, to just get people into this notion of practicing sound for themselves, which a lot of practitioners the fifth chakra is called the throat chakra, right?
Right.
It's completely mislabeled. Like, it's the sound chakra. Like, the throat and producing sound with your voice is only one side of that chakra. The other side is listening. Without listening, there is no intentional sound production, right? So if those two things are not in harmony, not working together, then I think it's really impossible to have a balanced fifth chakra.
Yeah. Wow. So I just while you were talking, I had a thought. I interviewed somebody who's his name's David Krantz, and he's an epigenetics coach. So he knows all about DNA and stuff like that. And he
Yeah.
was saying that your DNA, how it's expressing, is changing all the time, depending on the circumstances and stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
it would either coil tighter or it would unwind.
Yeah.
So that's like how it's expressing. I
Yeah.
wonder, sound must affect that somehow. I bet.
It certainly can. Yeah. Like, well, so it's like any practice, right? What's the purpose of any meditation practice, any yoga practice? Well, from my perspective, the foundational purpose of all those practices is to get present. And what is present but listening deeply?
Yeah.
Right? Like presence. Well, when a lot of practitioners will say, if you find your mind wandering, focus on your breath. Well, what does that focus on your breath means? It means listen to your breath, whether it's listen to the action of doing it, as in feeling it, right? Feeling to me is listening. Feeling physically is listening. Feeling emotion is listening.
I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, exploring thoughts is listening. All these are aspects of listening. But because science went through this period where they were saying, the eyes do this and the ears do this, and they're not really connected. We see all these things as separate, but they're not. They're all interconnected. Transsensual perception is a big field that's come up in the last probably 20 years. The idea that what we see is what we hear, and what we hear is what we see. Those two things really inform each other. And my music kind of goes into that. I use a lot of sounds that are recognizable. And when we recognize the sound, we have a memory of it. We have a memory of a personal experience with it. And that allows us, so that musical scenario or that musical sound allows us to access our own personal experience around that. And that's how my music can create a really individual, personalized experience for the listener, because everyone's going to have a slightly different interpretation of that sound.
Yeah. So my next question, I think, might lead into this, or we may have already answered it, but I've asked this question to a few different people, and I don't really know if I've gotten an answer, but how does sound change or expand consciousness? Is that impossible to answer?
Well, let's see. How does sound expand consciousness? What is consciousness, I guess, is maybe a precursor question. And to me, consciousness is awareness. It's contemplative. It's self-reflective. It's present. It's in the moment. It's thinking beyond ourselves. It's recognizing a connection between everything and myself. Right. I reject this notion that we're all one. I think that's not accurate. We're not all one, because I don't know what you had for breakfast. So, and if I were one, I would know what you had for breakfast, right? I think that's a little out of tune, actually. What I think, what I explore with that is, how am I connected with everything else?
Oh, yeah.
I'm like one small part of this whole big thing. And personally, that's what I came here to experience. I didn't come here to experience the unity of everything. That's where I came from. I came into this human body to experience this, whatever this is, from my unique perspective, and then bring that unique perspective back to the collective after this flesh sack dies. Right. So I think this notion of ascending beyond these bodies is a little bit like spiritual bypassing. It's like, that's not why I came here. I came here to experience all these sensations, the ones that hurt, and the ones that feel good, and the ones that I struggle with, and the ones that come easy for me. That's exactly why I came here. So for me to not face that in this life seems to be like a waste of this life, right?
Right, right. Well, so that's interesting. Because I read on your website that people can get sessions with you and you can like help them find their voice.
Yeah.
That's interesting to me because I'm not sure if I've really found mine, I mean, I guess questions are what my voice really wants to ask, but
yeah.
So how could you help guide someone into finding their voice?
Yeah. Well, so again, when I say things like this, I'm thinking in the broadest possible definition of finding one's voice. Finding one's voice might mean being able to speak your truth. There's a lot of people in this culture who really have trouble speaking their truth. And that's definitely a fifth chakra issue, right? I can actually see it in people's throats sometimes. There's this armor around this.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I always thought the tie, like when guys wear a tie,
Right.
I always thought like they're like suppressing their throat chakra.
Absolutely. It's like tying it off. It's like choking.
Yeah.
And you'll hardly ever find me wearing a tie because it's something really unnatural about it. And
yeah,
I mean, if you think about it, it's like an inverted noose, right? It's like a noose that we're in control of, but it's like, well, why would I want to do that? Like, that's just counterintuitive to me. So finding your voice might mean learning how to sing or tone. Toning is one of the ways that we can really affect our own bodies in a healing way, right? Because all of the major in our body go through our voice. So we literally have access to all corners of our body through our own voice. And furthermore, my voice is perfectly tuned for my body, right?
Yeah.
It's not as finely tuned for yours. And so when we start just doing simple things as toning and singing, and they know that singing creates oxytocin in the brain, which is just like kissing, and right. So we have this really simple built-in tool that's just right there for us to use. And I don't know how many people I've encountered that say, oh, I can't sing. And it's like, that's not the point, right? The point is to open this up and let your sound out. And most of the time when I hear myself sing recorded, I'm like, wow, I was kind of off pitch or whatever. And so what I can really help people do is get out of judgment space, right?
Yeah. Wow.
And that's where the listening side of the chakra is really, really important. So if we're listening for things in our voice, then we're automatically in judgment space. We're automatically judging it, we're evaluating it, we're critiquing it, and that's not the place to start. That's the place for professionals to be. The place for the rest of us is listening to things. What am I hearing? What am I feeling? And even more importantly, I don't care how it sounds to my ears. What I care about is, where is it vibrating in my body? Where is it vibrating outside of my body? I got this new gong, and I'm really feeling drawn to go to my sound healing room.
Yeah, take it there.
So I'm going to go mobile here. The first time I opened this gong, made by Soundscapes International, it's a titanium gong made with this amazing new technology. I just spoke. I pulled it out and I said, "Oh man, aren't you amazing?" or something like that, and it literally started vibrating. Right, like it started resonating with my voice. Yeah, it's. I don't know if you can hear that. It's pretty quiet, but just speaking is making the gong ring.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. What
is that coming through?
Wait, if you tone and then stop your voice, then you can hear it.
Yeah.
You'd have to have maybe a better microphone, but.
Well, so before, when you were asking, what does it do to our cells? That's what it does.
Makes our cells kind of vibrate like a cymbal.
It's called sympathetic vibration or entrainment. Well, entrainment has more to do with brain waves, but
yeah,
like that's what happens when we encounter sound, that it is, our cells are either sympathetically vibrating with it, their motion is being enhanced by it,
Mhm.
or it's being attenuated by it. It's our own vibration is being lowered by it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not here to say one kind of music does that better than another. I think that's a really individual thing. But that's really what's happening anytime there's a vibration in the room. Things are either being reinforced by it or they're being torn down by it. That's not a technical term, but that's basically
Fascinating.
what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
To go back to the voice thing, do you remember having experiences where you felt like you really stepped into like your authentic voice, or where you found like your authentic sound?
yeah, that's well, so I went through a phase, probably the 2000s.
You got a halo around you right now.
I know. That's my, I'm in my sound healing room here now. I really felt like coming down here. This is where
Yeah,
I've
cool.
got all my major bling, and
The
this
toys.
is where I do sessions and all my toys. And that originally was a moon. It was like a crescent moon. I fell in love with it at a fundraiser for a local private school, and so I bought it, and it just started to sag. So I made a sun out of it. And
There you go.
Is that too obnoxious if I sit in front of it?
No, not at all.
Cool. So in the 2000s, my throat chakra was completely closed down, and I don't need to get into the life circumstances that led to that, but I hated to sing. I hated the sound of my own voice, and I couldn't wear blue. I threw all my blue shirts away. I felt so ugly in blue. That shows
That's
you
bizarre.
how out of my fifth chakra I was.
Yeah.
And
I think a lot of people get sabotaged there. You know, I don't know if like people get targeted there somehow, or if there's some evil campaign, but yeah, I think many people can relate to that.
I don't know if it's an evil campaign or not, but it's our cultural conditioning. You are not valued for your individual contributions. You're valued for your contributions to the machine, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's built into our culture. That's why seeing all these young people, seeing all this activity out on the streets, and I don't want to get into protests and what, but this is people speaking their truth, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Regardless of whether you agree with them or not, they are out there speaking their truth. Wow, that's a great balancing act in a culture, in a society where we're taught to sit down, shut up, and
go to work,
and work, and produce, right? Be productive. Wow. I mean, like me sitting down and singing is not productive at all for the world. Well, unless I take a higher view of it and say, well, the more centered, the more grounded, the more whole I am, the more I have to contribute to society. But that's not an economic equation we've studied for very long. We're only now starting to study that part of the economic equation of how does well-being increase what everyone contributes to society and to the world, right? And humanity is a tremendous untapped resource because it's only been tapped for its physical productivity. Imagine when we start focusing on non-physical or metaphysical or spiritual or emotional productivity, right? Like that's when all of us can start being an active part of the equation. And that is harmonization, right? We're all listening to our intuitive selves. We're trusting our inner voices, right? We're trusting our gut, and we're speaking our truth. And when we can speak our truth, it becomes much easier to hear someone else's, especially if you disagree with it.
Yeah. And even like giving ourselves permission to say something that was a mistake or something, you know,
absolutely.
Like, you know, and just being like, okay, I can say what I'm feeling. And if it came out, you know, wrong, or like I offended somebody, I can apologize and it's fine, you know?
Yeah. Or we can even more create a piece of music between us, music being a back and forth, a counterpoint where we reach an understanding with each other, right?
Right.
I don't need to retract anything, but I will work really hard to understand your perspective and figure out how I can say that differently next time, so that it's still my truth, but it lands differently on
Yeah.
you. And
Yeah.
and that's, you know, the whole political correct movement and sort of the conservative backlash against that is kind of a misunderstanding of what's actually happening here. We're all just we're trying to find the most compassionate way to say things. I am, at least. I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to find the most compassionate ways of saying things. Why? Because that's going to get us both more of what we want. It's not
Yeah.
just going to get me what I want. It's going to get both of us more of what we want, and it's going to move us both forward instead of just one of us. And I think that's a really valuable endeavor for us to practice. And that is part of raising consciousness, right? Being aware of how what I do, what I say, what I sing, what I produce, how I move through the world is affecting others and lands on others.
Yeah.
And becoming more sensitive about that.
Definitely. Yeah, we just need to have conversation more. Just need to talk more. My next section that we're going to is to talk about Harmony Farm, the place your land. So how long have you been there, and maybe what brought you there, and what has it turned into?
Yeah. Oh, I love talking about this. One of my favorite subjects. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
I was on the Rome Prize Fellowship in 2010 and 11, which means I got to spend a year at the American Academy in Rome. My job was
Oh,
to
wow.
create
That would be cool.
or create, period. And my studio was in a little building that was on the very lawn where Galileo did his telescope demonstration in 1611, and I was there during the 400th anniversary of that. We had this big celebration. I wrote a piece about it, and
wow.
So I had tried to sell my house in Kansas City before I left for that, and I had been wanting to move out into the country, but I had looked, but I didn't find the right place, and it didn't quite feel right. Well, that was a housing crash, right after the housing crash, so I couldn't sell my house. So when I was in Rome, it was March. It was just around the halfway point of the fellowship, and I thought, I'm gonna have to go home to Kansas City. Not have to. I'm going home to Kansas City in 6 months. Maybe I should just start looking around and see what I can find. Well, this place was actually the first place I found online when I started looking.
Oh.
And it was strange because I was not looking this far outside of Kansas City, but this one just came up. And so when I came back, it was still available. I came out here 3 or 4 times, just walked the land, and actually closed on the property on 11/8/11. So November 8th of 2011. I mean, that's just when it happened, and so the numerology was kind of auspicious from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I wasn't ready to move out here yet. So over the course of about 6 months,
I'm still listening to you. I'm just going to let my cats in.
Oh yeah, no worries. Yeah. After so about 6 months to move out here. So I started living out here in the full time in the summer of 2012. Finally sold my house in Kansas City, and so I've been living out here full time for 8 years. And it's actually been my salvation. I without this place, I don't think I would still be alive today. It literally has saved my life.
Wow.
And part of that is, well, it's really remarkable. Everything I've ever done in my life, every skill I've ever learned, I'm actually using out here. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, like everything. I saved all the tools from when I was a carpenter, and thank goodness I did, because I'd be buying them again if I didn't,
Yeah.
And I'm trying to identify prairie wildflowers now, and I realized that, when I was working at a church camp on the west side of Pikes Peak in the late 90s, 80s and 90s, I identified all the wildflowers around there. I bought all the scientific books and was keying out plants and had this list of 450 species, not just these were the species that were growing around there, but I also would go out in the spring and find the first examples of each one blooming and where that was. And so and now I'm trying to do the same thing on this land. And so everything I've ever done in practice is really being put to use here. And
so I'm really, oh, go ahead.
No, that's all right.
I'm really drawn to the labyrinth because I don't know much about them.
Yeah.
And I think I saw on your website that you were kind of comparing mazes to labyrinths.
Well,
and yeah, I'm just wondering if you could go into that.
Yeah, sure. A lot of people ask me about my maze. And the main difference between a maze and a labyrinth, well, they're opposites, actually. A maze is kind of intended to confuse the participant, right? Like there's a lot of
Shining. I always think of The Shining.
Yeah, there may be only one path to the center, but you're often confused or misled in trying to find it. A labyrinth is the opposite. It's a single path that traces some kind of a design or a form that actually leads you only one place, and that is to the center, right? And my particular labyrinth has one spot a little past the midway point where it looks like you're actually going to go into the center, but you go around it and then you start going away from it again before you actually come into it. And so it's not that that's deceptive, but I find the metaphor of that to be really powerful. Like if you're discouraged on your way and think you're not getting there and it looks like you're getting further away, that may not actually be the truth. You may still be on your way to moving closer and closer to your center. So to me, the point of a labyrinth is to really get centered. They are known to create sacred spaces just by virtue of their form. But Chart, for example, that's had millions and millions of people walk that labyrinth, that just deepens the mysterious energy of them. And I rarely feel sober when I go in that labyrinth, and I say sober in a loose way.
Right.
I get loopy, I get lightheaded, I can really feel the energy, and so it's a powerful space. It's a really great space for contemplative meditation or just walking. Like the thing about a sacred symbol like that you can actually walk is that it does its thing whether you're aware it's doing it or not, right?
Huh.
And that's the thing that goes back to sound, right? Like sound affects us whether we're aware it's affecting us or not. So you asked about consciousness earlier. Well, isn't consciousness, the pursuit of consciousness, the pursuit of figuring out how something is affecting us and not just letting it happen, but becoming aware of that, right? That to me is increasing consciousness. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm sharing. I'm sharing your website. So
cool, awesome. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, so right there's his labyrinth. Pretty amazing. It's a web in the middle, and then the labyrinth is the one that's this lower one, right?
Yeah. So
can you see my mouse?
Yeah, I can.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah. So the labyrinth is the lower part of that. The spider web is not actually a labyrinth or a maze. It's just like a pattern. That whole space I call the Prairie Temple.
Yeah.
That's an earlier version of it, and that's a different. That spiral is a different place. I started. One of the ways this place saved my life was I started connecting with the land in a really deep way. I started listening with my eyes and my ears and my feelings differently than I had before, maybe deeper than I had before.
Yeah. How did you get this? Do you have a drone or something that got that picture?
Yeah, Google Earth gives me a photograph once a year. I decided to get a drone so that I could actually start documenting the progress of it. And yeah, before you started sharing that, I was actually on my way outside to walk around the Sun Temple.
Sure, do whatever. Yeah.
Which is right next to my house. Let me invert my screen here. So there's this semicircular path that leads up to it, and this is just to the east of my house. The spiders, they really grow webs here.
Wow.
Profusely. This time of year, the spiders are intense. Yeah, I'm actually wearing a couple of them. So this is a 42 stone standing circle, all stones from the property.
Fire
with
pit.
the fire pit in the middle. I call this the Sun Temple. I sort of renamed it after I built the Moon Temple up top. So that's a real feminine space. This is actually a dual spirit space. So masculine and feminine space. And that's one of the things I really work with a lot out here on the land and on myself is the rebalancing of the masculine and feminine. You know,
Yeah.
Our society is so imbalanced in the masculine. It's not even a real masculine. It's
Wounded masculine.
It's a really wounded and toxic masculine. And so I'm really working a lot out here with shifting that. So all these spaces are balanced. There's the temple up top, for example, is a masculine temple because it's on the highest part of the property, but the whole temple is balanced by that feminine labyrinth. You know, it's got such curvilinear shapes, but the labyrinth itself also has stones in it that is that's articulating the linear geometry of the space. And so even the labyrinth itself is a balanced masculine and feminine space.
Yeah. It's funny that you're talking about the balance of those two, because my next question was, what would you like to see in the future for our world, in our country? And sounds like maybe a balance of the masculine and feminine might do us some good.
Well, yeah, I think, you know, we've been working towards that for a while now. And well, what do I want for our society? Well, let's look at this little flower bed out here. These are all wildflowers, Kansas wildflowers, and they're all existing in harmony. They're all sharing the space.
Yeah.
They're true to their form. There's actually a humongous one of those big yellow butterflies here. I saw a monarch here before we started too. So there's just lots of unique diversity here that is endemic to this place, and I think that's what I'd love to see more of, and that's what this conversation is all about, right?
Yeah.
We've had sort of a singular white male perspective on pretty much everything for the last couple thousand years, and I think it's time to, yeah.
Oh, you turned your mic off. You got to unmute yourself. There you go.
Sorry, I bumped into my phone. Yeah. So, yeah, I think, and it's not lost on me, you know, that I'm a white male, and so my job right now, first and foremost, is to listen, right? Listen to other voices, and I actively seek out those voices that I have not interacted with much, that I have not listened much to, and listen to those voices and get to know them and understand those voices. And that might be, you know, in classical music, that's definitely listening more to people of color, Hispanic and Black voices. And so I think, you know, for me, it's like, what are the riches out there that I've been missing because of my white privilege? What are the riches that I've kind of just been ignoring, and how can I engage those? How can I support those? And how can I bring more of those into, help bring more of those into common practice?
So you're a teacher? You teach at a college?
Yeah, I'm the coordinator of music composition at the University of Missouri, Kansas City Conservatory.
So do you have any advice for young people who really want to see a change in the world? Like what they should be focusing on, or Is it really, focus on
No, I
themselves?
don't.
You,
I
you
don't.
don't, you don't know?
No, in fact, they have advice for me.
Oh, okay.
It's the opposite, man. I'm just looking at them, just marveling at what I'm seeing young people accomplish, the different ways that I see they're wired from us,
Yeah.
ways that like it's built into them how to address these everything we've been talking about. It's built into them. Like like gender fluidity, that's just a given in this upcoming generation. They don't have to learn that. I have to learn that as a 58-year-old as of yesterday, right? It's like
Oh, happy
I have to
birthday.
practice that, um and friends, family members are changing their pronoun usage. So it's me as the old fart in the room that has to practice that stuff. And it doesn't come naturally to refer to a family member as they or them instead of he, she, or
Right.
and that's my job as an older person, is to connect with the way these young people naturally are. I don't want to muck around in that, Rich. No way, because they're the ones that are showing us. And I think it's always been that way. And old people have been reticent to yield that hegemonious control, And I'm here to say, old people, man, let's let go.
Yeah.
Let's see what these amazing young people can and will create and are already creating, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, do you, have you ever experienced depression in your life? And do you have any advice for someone who might be feeling that? I guess and the other word is just like a pointlessness. I notice
Yeah,
me sometimes and other people,
yeah,
it's just like kind of a pointlessness but it's not like it sticks around. It comes and goes.
right. Yeah, yeah. That's a really great question, and it might be that I have experienced depression. I don't label myself that way.
Yeah. You don't want to
Um,
identify as it because it might stick with you.
well, it comes with a whole bunch of stuff that may not be mine. Yes,
Mm.
it might be technically depression, but there may be a whole bunch of stuff that's not mine. This is a hard subject to talk about, right?
Sure.
Because I don't want to diminish anyone else's experience or even comment on that. I can only speak on my own experience. I went through maybe a 3 or 4 year period where I was sleeping 10 to 12 hours a night. And some people might have said, well, you're depressed. Well, okay, maybe I was. My view on that was my body, if my body can sleep this long, then it's doing something that it needs that sleep for. And I was going through a tremendous healing period at that point, both emotionally, psychologically, and even physically. And so I guess what I'm saying is I'm really, really careful with how I frame things,
Yeah.
because those frames are not empty. Those frames come with a whole bunch of stuff that may actually make my condition worse.
Yeah.
So let me give you an example. This is something I practice regularly here. So I was running the chainsaw one day. Probably should have quit before I did. I cut a branch that was about this big, a hedge branch that was actually loaded with tension. And when I cut through it, it smacked me on my left wrist really, really hard. I mean, it hurt like hell. So I've had enough experience with this. I thought, okay, first thing I need to do is ground that energy. There was a whole lot of physical energy that just went into my wrist in a really unnatural,
Mm.
hurtful way. So I took all that energy and I grounded it. That's step number one. Got to ground that energy. If you don't ground the energy of trauma, that energy is still, like sound, is still mucking around in your body,
Yeah.
creating damage, right? So the first thing was to ground the energy. And the pain it didn't completely go away, but it went down substantially. And that, that took a couple of minutes because I was wearing rubber boots. It's harder to ground with rubber boots on. It's totally possible, but it's easier with bare feet on the ground.
Right. Yeah.
And so that night, I was kind of massaging it, turning my wrist, and all of a sudden it was more pain than I've experienced. And I have a really high threshold of pain. I've had pain my whole life, but this was intense. So I reached out to, I think she's a mutual friend, Julie North, a medical intuitive. And I said, Julie, are you still up? I need to talk. And fortunately she was. And I said, can you just check in with my wrist and see what's going on? She's like, well, you've got a tendon that's almost completely torn through. So I did it myself when I was massaging. I weakened the tendon with the accident, but when I was, manipulating and pulling on and stretching my wrist, I actually tore it myself. And when she said that, I could actually see it in my own inner vision, right? It was just hanging on by a thread. So I thought, okay, what am I going to do about this? And I thought, well, let's put our money where our mouth is. So I came down to the sound healing room. I started doing a bunch of sound with it. I couldn't sleep. It was so painful. And I don't really take pain medication. I might have taken an ibuprofen, but and so I sat in my lazy boy where we started this conversation, and I said, okay, I really need my nanites to go to work. And by nanites, that's spelled KNIGHT. So they're my little knights that are almost invisible. They're these little tiny workers inside my body that can fix things. And so I literally envisioned this little army of nanites working on this tendon, and I literally saw them stitching that tendon back together.
Wow.
And 36 hours later, I was completely pain-free and had complete use and mobility of that wrist again.
Wow.
And so this started as a conversation about frames, right? So if my frame had been, oh man, I really fucked up my wrist, well, that comes with a long recovery time, right? The long recovery time is not endemic to my body. The long recovery time comes from a thought form in my mind. And when I change that thought form to, hey, my body knows how to deal with this. Let's deal with it together. Let's collaborate. My body can fix those things. I did it the other day with chemicals. I have a weed here that the only way for me to deal with it is to spray chemicals. Well, by the time it started burning my leg, I thought it was just sweat, but it was actually chemicals dripping on my pant leg. I was like, oh, that feels like my skin's starting to burn. So I came down to the house. I stripped down. I washed it thoroughly with soap and water. Then I went up to the medicine wheel, the sun temple where we just were. I grounded that energy, right? Because chemicals like that have an intense chi. And I work with the chi of those chemicals before I even use them. I change the tuning of those chemicals to more fine tune it to the specific task I'm using it for. But there's a tremendous amount of chi in that bottle of chemicals.
Right.
And so I tune it to my own purpose. Well, so I know there's a lot of energy there. So I grounded it, put my bare feet on the ground in the sun temple, grounded that energy first. Then I spent time in my sound healing room with my singing bowls and my gong. And there was absolutely no residual effect, like nothing ever showed up on my skin. And so this is the power that we have, going back to our personal voices. Like it's not in the best interest of a corporation trying to make money for shareholders that we understand this. It's not in the best interest of a government who wants subjects they can control for us to understand this. So we have to step into our own courage and start practicing this. And I'm not ever going to practice this on other people, right? I'm willing to help people if they want to explore this on their own. And each person has to decide how much am I going to let go of those old frames to really go into this? Because it's kind of scary. It's like, well, what if I really did damage something? And that happened when I ran the chainsaw across my knee. I'm like, I think I need some help with this. I don't think my own Reiki is just going to do this. And
Right.
so I got 21 stitches, and but I'm here to help people step into that power in whatever way they're ready, willing, and able to do that. And that's part of finding our voice and speaking our truth.
Yeah.
No one else can do that for us, right? And I've had enough experiences like this to know that it works, and to also know that if I'm going to practice this, I have to practice it 100%. I can't practice it 99%.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to practice it 100%. And it's well, there's lots of little steps along the way, but the first step, which I hope everyone explores, that will change everyone's life, this I can guarantee, is if we all start focusing on what it is we want, right, instead of what we don't want. When I used to feel the cold coming on, I'd be like, oh man, I'm getting a cold. Well, that's a frame that comes with getting a cold.
Right. Yeah.
Regardless of what my body's doing. So if I change that frame and say, hey, immune system, I feel this thing coming on. So there's no denial that I'm feeling like I'm getting sick, right? We don't want to deny that. That's physical, emotional, and spiritual bypassing as well. It's like, hey, I feel like I'm getting sick. Immune system, I know you know what to do with this.
Yeah. Let's supercharge.
Let's just take charge of this. And if I need to sleep more, I'll sleep more. That's my part of the bargain, right? I need to give my body a rest. Maybe that's one thing it's asking for, right? So I'm really, really careful with frames. They make a difference, and we're so used to. I see it politically. I see it happening already. A campaign against something instead of for something.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Let's be for something, and that's what I see. These young people are doing it, man. They're like, I'm not gonna put my energy being against something. I'm gonna try to build something that's so compelling that people can't not choose it.
Yeah. Wow, that was great. Yeah, I just had that thought that you don't hear anything about supercharging your immune system as a defense for the pandemic that's going on right now. It's all about what drug is going to help you or whatever, or social distancing. It's like, how about we focus on supercharging our immune system?
Yeah. And the best way to supercharge your immune system, in my view, is with thought forms. So I have this theory. I think I know how Jesus healed people.
Oh, nice. Let's hear it.
Whether you believe in that or not, whether you believe that was real or metaphorical or whatever, I think, and his words kind of bear this out. What did he say to the person laying on his bed that couldn't walk? He said, "You're healed. Get up and walk." He didn't ask, "Do you feel better?" Right? That's a frame that allows the person to connect right back to their disease, right? So I feel like he had this way of stripping those thought form frames out of their brains.
Yeah.
So that their bodies could do what their bodies knew how to do, which was heal itself. And so when I say focus on what we want, what I'm saying is create frames around whatever it is you're dealing with that move you towards what you want. And Julie North talks about this beautifully in terms of resonance, right? So what we want may not always be resonant. So that's and I love the use of that word, because resonance changes, right? Even the resonance of the Grand Canyon is different every day depending on the humidity, right? So resonance is not always the same. So it's always about what is resonating right now. But in terms of health and body maintenance, it's resonant for me to want to be healthy all the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I want to move towards that all the time. That doesn't mean there's going to be times when I need to reevaluate things in my life that aren't supporting that. Absolutely. And I'm not saying you can do this all with thought forms, although I'm actually trying it,
Yeah.
So I think the frames are so important, and we're used to focusing on the frames that that illuminate a topic towards what we don't want instead of towards what we do want.
Well, okay. So this last question that I have written down, and we could probably relate it to the frame concepts, but what's your advice on living a more cosmic life? And I don't know if we need to define cosmic, but I mean, like
Yeah.
you posted a video on my Facebook page before we started, and you had orbs flying around the room. Just a more magical, more cosmic life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I sent that to you because I've got lots of photos of orbs, right? But I've never had a video with one. I mean, here's an example of one of my photos of orbs. This particular one is maybe not so cosmic because I when I started seeing orbs out here, and this goes back to this place saving my life. I'm convinced I was dying in 2014. I mean, I was in pain constantly. I felt horrible. I didn't want to be here. And I started taking these photographs outside. The first ones were Halloween night 2014. And I started seeing things in the photograph. And I was like, wow, I don't know what that is. Well, it turns out some of them were photographs of my breath because it was kind of a cold night. And
Wow.
I could literally see a universe in my breath, and some of these are on my website if people want to check them out. And so what was cosmic to me is the universe literally came down right in front of my face and said, dude, like home is not out there. Home is in here. Like literally there's a universe in every breath. And by the way, here it is. We're going to show it to you. I've got one photograph up on my
On the
photography
website?
site. Yeah, it's called Architecture of a Single Breath. And it looks like a photograph of a galaxy far, far away,
I'll see if I can pull it up.
Yeah, it's on the C tab, and it'll be one of those.
The C tab.
Yeah, the very first tab. Yeah, there you go.
What's on? Okay.
Up at the top, the menu's up at the top. Click on C. By the way, the menu items in my website that create an acronym called self-reflect. I don't know how many people put that together, but yeah,
nice.
If you click, that's actually snow, but that's up on the prairie. That's actually kind of moisture. That's a detail from that Architecture of a Single Breath. I call that the arc of the universe or something.
Wow. What kind of camera do you use?
Oh, it was a Sony professional rangefinder. It was not an SLR. But yeah, I started capturing all these orbs on that night, and that reconnected. There it is. It's
this
that.
One?
No, keep going. It's the second to last one there. That one.
Wow.
That's a photograph of my breath.
Wow. So what's that light in the middle right here? Is that the moon or something?
That's the moon. Yeah, it's a half moon. Yeah. And so I started seeing these images, and at that point I didn't want to be here because I was literally homesick for the stars, and I thought the stars was my home, right? That's this notion of ascending to the stars. It's like, well, yeah, that's where I came from, and this sort of brings us full circle to where we started, right? But right now, home is right here. Home is in my body. Home is where my soul is, and that's in this body. And I felt like my wiser self or my guides or whatever you want to call them was saying, dude, that's not out there. It's in here. You don't need to go back out there. It's right here. Explore it. So what cosmic means to me is reconnecting with the mystery of life.
Yeah, and connecting it into your body.
Yes, and experiencing it, exploring it, and observing, right? Like observing is so important, and observing is another word for listening,
Right.
right?
This one right here, is there a person in the middle there?
Yeah, that's me.
Wow.
Well,
But there's
so
there's like light going through you. You've like dematerialized or something a little bit.
yeah, so that's a long exposure where I just walked into the picture
Oh,
or out of it. So, but this is the thing, Rich. So is that a magical picture? Well, what does it evoke in you? What do you see in it? What does it make you contemplate and think about, right? Doesn't matter how it was done. Are orbs magical beings? Are they fairies? Are they aliens? Are they dust? I mean, I think it's all of those things, right? I've seen orbs on my glasses when the setting sun shines through them and I focus really closely. I see things that look exactly like some of the orbs I've taken in the photo. But that little video you were mentioning, which is on my feed and your feed, I can't explain those little dots. I tried to recreate it and I couldn't. I couldn't see them with the naked eye. And and so what is cosmic? Well, cosmic is like we don't know what's going on. What is spiritual? Well, spiritual is anything I feel like I can't understand and comprehend. And what would life be without that? Oh my God, I wouldn't even want to be here without that, you know?
trying
So
to see if I can find that the thing that you posted.
yeah, it's pretty amazing. I encourage everybody to go look at it. It's I think you're gonna have to go well uh oh, you know what? I sent it to you in a messenger chat.
Oh,
Yeah, I didn't actually put it on your feed. It's in that messenger chat. And I've also put it on my Hugging the Earth page and my Sound Practitioner page.
there we go.
Yeah, I don't know if people will be able to see them. They're pretty. They're not subtle. If you look, especially over my left shoulder,
Yeah, there's one to the left. I mean,
there's one.
there's one just crossed.
There's actually one that moves towards the camera.
Oh yeah, it's just right there in the center.
Yeah,
It's funny. And you're sure they're not bugs? I got to ask that.
sure. Not what?
They're not bugs.
No. I mean, I've got a lot. I've got a lot of spiders in here, but to my knowledge, spiders don't fly around like that.
I mean, there are quite a few of them. So yeah, well, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and so are they mysterious? Is it reflecting light off the gong and something else? Yeah, maybe. But I've never seen that in a video of mine. I've seen it in other people's videos. But it's something new that I've never seen in my own. So that to me is mysterious, right?
Yeah.
And that's not the end of the story any more than taking photographs of orbs are, because the blue one I showed you up there on the wall, after I started taking all these orb photos that just mysteriously happened, I started experimenting with a squirt bottle. So I'd take a squirt bottle and squirt a mist, and then I'd photograph it. And that's what this one is.
Oh, okay.
That is actually me creating, and yet there's still something that happened in the patterning of it that is mysterious and magical, right?
And cosmic, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think we make this mistake a lot, that if we can explain it intellectually, that it has no magic and mystery. And I reject that notion. I think if something is magical and mysterious, I'm obligated to intellectually explore that and see how many different angles I can look at it from, see what else I can find from it, see what else is in there that can expand my mind and my understanding of my own physical, spiritual, and emotional reality. Look, there is no objective reality out there that we're all experiencing in common. Reality is by nature subjective, and science doesn't change that. I don't think science changes that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think most physicists would be the first ones to say, the more that we discover, the more we kind of have to scratch our heads and say,
Yeah.
Isn't that what 0 point is all about?
There's a few different things. 0 point was just to trick my mind into dropping all my agendas and trying to make something happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Cool.
to try to like become neutralized so I can tune in and be present.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think I originally got it from talking to Todd, this guy who helped me get this started. Basically, any problem that you perceive on the outside world, you need to turn the mirror back around and see that it's somehow in you. So
Right.
if you can neutralize it in you, you'll see it less in the outside world.
Well, so I looked up the physics definition of that because it's a concept in physics.
Nice.
Have you looked into that yet?
No, but please, go on.
Google it. Well, I don't fully.
Okay, you don't have. Okay.
But it's this notion that at the coldest temperature that we can comprehend, and that's probably through mathematics. I think it's hydrogen still continues to move and it becomes more fluid. So it's this notion that there is no such thing as no motion, right? And music and sound and vibration is motion. It's our physical experience of that motion, right? And it's something that we can really tangibly understand. So I just found it really interesting that I think the science, I'm curious what you find in this scientific concept that you're kind of exploring the metaphors of, right? And that's to me where it becomes poetic and musical and artistic is when we use these concepts as metaphors to help us maybe understand things in a different way than we already do. So,
well, we will have to pick this up where we left off, I think. I hope you want to come back and do this again.
I'd love to. I love talking about this stuff. I love exploring it, and I hope you don't mind if I plug my class coming up.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Do whatever you need.
Maybe in the comments of this live video, you're going to post this on your feed afterwards. Yeah,
well, it's there. It'll be there. So if you just go to it, you can push links and stuff like that.
I'll post a link to the course. It's 5 2-hour sessions called Introduction to Sound Practice for Wellbeing. It's run through the Global Center for Advanced Studies, which is a new type of college that's kind of where everybody's considered a researcher. Everybody's sort of on equal footing in that we're all explorers of mind, body, and spirit. And it's kind of co-owned by everybody that's participating. It's kind of a new take on higher education, which is really kind of interesting. And so check it out. I'll put I would love to have people join, and we're just going to be exploring all this practically through practice. Practitioner, no. As a practice, and hopefully and giving people some tools to start exploring this on their own, because it's something we can all do regardless of what tools we have. We all have this instrument. Everyone does. Well, most everybody. And those that don't, we can find other ways to do it. So it's definitely going to be participatory, lots of experience from people joining. So
sounds great. Just post a link in it. I'm sure someone will find it somehow. So.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much. And I'll be in touch with you to schedule another one. All right.
All right. Sounds great. Thanks for talking.
All right. Have a good night. See you, everybody.
Too. Do well.